got a job as an intern with the Rockets in 1994. Ended up leaving HBU. Was actually, we're going to head out to a school in New Mexico to play baseball, but I would have to sit out a year because it was my second transfer and I didn't want to go all the way out there. So I ended up going to Sam Houston State, where I had a bunch of friends from high school there and their extended friends who I kind of knew from just going up there and hanging out from time to time. And it was close enough to Houston for me to do my thing. They had a good RTV department. So I ended up going to Sam. My intentions were to try to walk on my 5th year there, but I elected not to after I got into the broadcasting thing. So again, I started interning for the Rockets, graduated. They hired me full time, produced games. Got a gig also working at Rice University, doing sidelines for football and men's and women's basketball on the radio. Did that for 3 years, and then after that, moved on to. I got the primary play-by-play job at the University of Houston, doing football and men's basketball. And again, simultaneously, I'd been producing Rockets games. We had a WNBA team, the Comets, an Arena Football League team as well. So I did stuff for them. Flash forward to 2003. The Rockets ended up making some changes on their broadcasting team. And I was given the opportunity to sort of become full-time broadcast guy with them. So I left my duties at U of H after the football season in 2003 to do pre-half and post-game shows with the Rockets. So I did that for a handful of years. And then the longtime voices of the Rockets, Gene Peterson and Jim Foley, ended up retiring. I was fortunate to be promoted into doing radio play-by-play. So I started doing that in 2008. And then I did that up until about full-time up until about, what was it now, 6 or 7 years ago, when Bill Worrell, the longtime TV voice of the Rockets, didn't want to travel anymore. And so they came to an agreement where he could just do home games. And so I got the opportunity to do road games on TV. So I did radio at home, TV on the road. And then last season was my first season after Bill retired, doing TV full time. So here I am. And this is season number 29 for me in some shape or form with the Rockets.
So almost at 30.
Almost. I'm getting there. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. That's a great story. It's a long journey, and I'll congratulate you in a year when you get that 30. But
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's a big mark. The next question is, like, how do you prepare for the games when you when you have a game coming up?
Well, I prepare for games like I'll prepare for a game the exact same way, whether it's a preseason game or if it's game 7 of the finals. My preparation doesn't change. I have spotting boards. Everybody who does play-by-play has some form of a spotting board. I mean, there's no uniform way to do this. Everybody eventually settles in on something that works best for them. I happen to use Word documents instead of writing, doing handwritten things, because then I can keep things in there as opposed to always constantly having to rewrite them. But I have Word documents and spotting boards for both teams. Before the season, every season, I'll obviously update my Rockets one completely. And then as each game moves on, obviously I'll add and take away things from my Rockets board. And then as we prepare to play each opponent, especially for the very first time, I'll rebuild their board as well with their updated roster and so forth. And so I do that. I use Basketball Reference heavily. Each team has PR departments that put out game notes. And so you access those. I do some of my own research as well. And then once I kind of get my boards updated and then comb through all of the various game notes and material that I use to prepare, the next thing I do is I just go in and do a quick sort of, I guess I'll call it my own personal scouting report, pouring through some of the more advanced numbers in terms of, what the teams like to do, what the tendencies are, so I can just kind of have an idea of who the Rockets are playing, what they like to do, and as a result, what are some of the things that the Rockets ultimately need to avoid to be successful, or need to do well based on the other team's weaknesses to be successful. And so I kind of put all that stuff together, and I have it in front of me, and it's kind of like taking a test. an open book test, right? If your teacher allowed you to come in with a couple of pages of as many notes as you possibly wanted to put on there to use for an exam and access those in front of you as you took it. That's kind of what game preparation is. So you kind of put everything together. You use basically, I don't know, 1/10, 1/100th of the information that you have on there. But it's to me, it's always better to be over prepared than to be underprepared, and then you just kind of go and use that as you can sprinkle it in when the moment is needed and necessary to kind of throw in some of that stuff that you prepared for.
Right, like I use Basketball Reference a lot too. I mean, when I make videos, I like to use, if it's football reference or if it's basketball reference or if it's baseball.
Yep.
I mean, like I like it because it gives you all the stats, and then it can give you like more information than all the stats. And I get what you're saying with most of the stuff with writing all that stuff down for all the stats. I mean, like I told you, I did the Rockets live game in Dallas, and when I got home from school, I got a piece of paper and I wrote all the players, for even like the players that were out, all their names down on the roster for Dallas too, and put all the stats. And as the game was going on and I was like broadcasting the game, I would as Jalen Green makes a layup, I would put two. And so that's like what I'm doing is like what I was doing was basic compared to what y'all are doing is very hard. I mean, like what y'all do is very serious and it's not an easy job. So credit to y'all.
Well, I will say is that the higher of a level that you work in broadcast, we have we have stats monitors that are there. You get those at the college level too. I'm not so sure how much you get it at the high school level, but you definitely get it at basically every level of college. You have monitors there that are automatically, updated with the stats by the official stats crews that are working in the stadiums or the arena. So there's that. And then also I have, everywhere we go, we have a statistician that also does the logging, as you were sort of referencing there, because as you're working and calling a game, it's pretty much impossible to keep track of all
Yeah, it
those,
was so hard.
all that minutia, all those details. And so,
yeah, I'd like look down and then
yeah, you can't do it.
Score.
And then
I didn't get every bucket.
Then there's like a trillion numbers rolling around in your head, and it's just impossible. So I always have a stats person working with me, and ultimately, my instructions to them is to keep track of trends and runs. So the Rockets are on a 14-2 run, or the Mavericks have outscored the Rockets 8 straight in the last couple of possessions, things like that, because those are the things that I simply just, and very few, if any, people can call a game, keep track of what's going out on the floor of the stadium, and also sort of keep track of everything that they've prepared in their on their spotting boards. And then also, oh, by the way, keep track of all these various runs. And like you said, in football, your statistician is there to let you know. In football, you have a statistician who keeps track of, okay, they'll let you know that's a 42-yard punt, right? Sometimes it's easy if they're whole numbers to kind of, if somebody punted the ball from the 20 and it was just fair caught at the 50, it was a bad punt, right? That's a 30-yard punt, right? That's easy to keep track of. But once you kind of get into some of those other areas, you can't keep track of that. So you have a statistician who kind of in football, you have a statistician who keeps track of that information for you and then relays that to you in some form or fashion, whether it's in a handwritten note or speaking in your ear. And then you also in football have a spotter. So what a spotter does is when you're working a football game, you have your spotting boards. In football, they're typically always, whether you print them out or something, they're always in some sort of paper fashion. And then your spotter helps point out to you who made the tackle, maybe if there were certain substitutions, because again, when you're doing football, there's a lot of things going on as well. And so you need to do this, you need a lot, and to do it well, you need a lot of people to help you out. And I can't speak for others, but if I have someone who's very good with stats, it helps me out tremendously.
Right. This was a question that I didn't have on here originally, but I was the other night, might have been after the Pacers or Warriors game. I was looking on Instagram. I didn't get to watch the games, right, because I was in Florida, but I was looking on Instagram. I saw on Ryan Holland's on his Instagram page. There's like he took a picture at the game when y'all were broadcasting, and it looked like y'all have like a little screen to watch the game if you can't. Is that right? I don't know. It's like
So, okay, yeah. So when we're sitting there, we each have a stats monitor and then we have a program monitor. And so the program monitor is ultimately what's going out over the air. So we use the program monitor for replays. And so when you're and TV is a little bit different from radio, is that radio, you have a producer, but your radio producer, for the most part, depending upon how complicated a radio broadcast you want to run. But in its most basic sense, a radio producer is sort of getting you in and out of breaks, running commercials, letting you know when station IDs need to be taken. Again, some shows have sound bites and actualities that they want to throw in there, which are coordinated with the producer. But on TV, your producer, in essence, is sort of the boss of the broadcast. And so while you're working, you also have a producer in your ear who's working in the truck the entire time. And so they're the ones who are letting you know when there are replays, when there are certain graphics that are coming up, when you need to read certain sponsored elements. And then that's also coordinated through a stage manager who hands you certain cards to read. TV is a pretty big production of people, not to mention all the people that need to be that need to be there to pull off a television production, from the camera folks to the audio people to all the people in the truck, who are the director, the producer, the technical director, people who are running replays, graphics, associate producers, all that stuff. TV is a pretty big production, but when we're sitting there, we have our stats monitors and then we have a program monitor, and that's ultimately what the viewers are seeing out over the air. And so our producer will let us know replays coming up. And then you can kind of look at the program monitor and comment on what is actually going out over the air.
Yeah. My next question is, like, how important is it to you to have like a good relationship with like the players and coaches and staff like that? Like,
it's very important. I'll say that it's probably, in my opinion, and some people might differ with me on this, I think it's more important from where I sit to have better relationships with the coaches as opposed to the players. Now again, it's, you don't want to have bad relationships with anyone, and I think I do my absolute best to make sure that never happens whatsoever. You got to remember that the players ultimately are the product, and they are what matters above and beyond anyone, including myself, because without the players, there is no game, and without a game, there is no opportunity for me to do what I really enjoy doing. But ultimately, in terms of, I think from where I sit, in terms of understanding what the team is attempting to do, and some strategies and so forth, I think it's ultimately better to have a closer relationship with coaches than players, because you get a lot more of that kind of insight and information from the coaches than you do the players. And ultimately, over the years, to be perfectly honest, I've had good relationships, closer relationships with some players than others. Ultimately, I kind of leave it up to them whether or not they want to whether they feel comfortable or want to even get in a chummy relationship with somebody who at this point is now, in many respects, 25 years older than they are. But I think relationships with coaches are paramount. You have to have good relationships with your coaches.
yeah, I agree, because I mean, like, I don't know. Like, does it kind of feel like you can talk with the coaches more than players sometimes? I mean, that's.
I mean, yes. You have to also realize the players also, especially at the professional level, they have so many people who want a piece of them, for lack of a better phrase. Like, everybody wants something from, right? Everybody, the general fans, they want pictures and they want autographs, and media people want interviews and conversations. And then they also have, people who, want them to promote their products and all this stuff. So they have a lot of people sort of pulling at them at all times. And sometimes I just kind of want to, because they're just human, they just kind of want to get away from some of that some of the time. But ultimately, to me, it's always been easier and better to talk with coaches as opposed to players. But you can also, quite honestly, get a lot of stuff out of the players too if you build quality relationships with them. But ultimately, in my experience, I've just found that coaches tend to be a little bit more forthcoming and open about, again, the things that I think are pertinent to me, trying to me to do my job to the best of my ability. Excuse me.
Yeah, I feel like I'm lucky to have some close relationships. Like I got to meet you and Ryan at that Rockets game. That's where it kind of started. I mean, I have like sort of right. I mean, Raphael Stone is like a family friend, sort of. I mean, my godfather, his wife, and Raphael Stone's wife are close friends. So my godfather
Okay.
and him are close, and then just a bunch of other. I even went to the Rockets Clippers game they played a home game, not the most recent, the one before. They played 2 games in Houston. I went and sat in Alperen Sengun's seats with his girlfriend. So I mean, like, I'm lucky to have a lot of connections with the Rockets that have just emerged like out of nowhere. But so I feel really lucky. I mean, I even sat right next to one of Deshaun Nix's best friends, and I'm going to interview him. I'm going to interview Stone. So I feel really lucky to have all these connections. So yeah.
Well, relationship building is extremely well, it's extremely important, generally speaking. Networking in life is extremely important, but especially in the sports business and the sports broadcasting business, where it's extremely competitive. It's important to always network and build those relationships, and then ultimately, hopefully, have those relationships at some point benefit you on down the line as you're trying to work and take steps in your career. That's one of the first bits of advice that I was given when I got into this by a friend's dad of mine who had been in the business, to use those relationships to help advance your cause, because you never know when somebody you meet might be in a position to recommend you or to actually hire you for something. And it's so competitive to know people, and then ultimately have those people provide you some sort of level of support is very important. So again, that's pretty good start for you. And I would continue to say that to maintain those relationships, because you never know where that might take you. And then if it doesn't work in one area, then that person perhaps could speak on your behalf or help you with somebody else. And that's ultimately how people, especially in this industry, get in, which is the most difficult thing, to get in some official capacity where somebody actually trusts you to pay you to do it. And then to move forward and up in the profession is you have to have people who believe in you and support you. And I've been very, very fortunate over the course of my career. There is no way that I get to this point. Absolutely no way. You have to have talent. You have to have some ability to do this, but it's virtually impossible to get to this point of my career or anybody's career unless there were a lot of people who were in your corner and believed you and supported you and gave you opportunities along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I am lucky, and I know that. And the only one I have not been able to get on was LP. I mean, I even tried to ask his girlfriend, and she said that he doesn't do interviews. He's even been offered in like Turkish, and so he does not like it at all. He only does the media and got in with y'all. So, but I am lucky. But my next question has to do with the media again. So for when you started with road games in 2016-17 season, and then all the way from the 2020-21 season, you had Matt Bullard along your side.
Mm-hmm.
When it changed to Ryan Hollins, was it a little hard at first? I mean, obviously Ryan's a great guy, but that change, I mean, change is always hard. So
I wouldn't say it was hard, but it was different.
Yeah.
They're two very different people, especially in terms of their broadcasting styles, and there absolutely was an adjustment. Look, I had known Matt since he had played for the Rockets. And so I had a relationship with him. And then ultimately, once he started working and he retired and started working as an actual broadcaster, I had developed a friendship, close friendship with him over the years. And so when I slid into the opportunity to work with him on TV, as you mentioned back whenever it was in 2016, I already kind of knew him, knew what his personality was like. And so that transition was a little easier just because we had built a relationship. And when Ryan was hired, I'd never met him. I had never spoken to him until he came in for his formal interview. What they did ultimately is they brought in all the finalists for that job, and we did mock broadcast together. We did a mock broadcast off of a monitor in a studio together, and that was the first time that I had ever met him before. And so when he was ultimately hired, it did take a little bit of an adjustment period for both of us because he hadn't worked with me, I hadn't worked with him. We had to kind of get to know each other as from person to person. And so, that was a step in the process, and then had to learn, what each other's liked or disliked or what their style was like. And one thing that was very different with Ryan as opposed to Matt was that Ryan's he's much more talkative on the broadcast than Matt ever was. And so for me, someone coming from, a radio background, and I'm used to just talking constantly all the time. With Matt, there were a lot more areas that I was able to do so. With Ryan, I kind of understood that he was going to fill some of those voids a lot more than Matt did. And so I had to pull back. And so to me, working with Ryan, my biggest adjustment as opposed to working with Matt, once I kind of got to know him, was that I needed to sort of pull back on what I do because he's going to fill that space a lot more than Bullard did. So I wouldn't call it hard, but it was just different. It frankly took us probably, I would say last year, to be honest, 2.5 months to kind of get comfortable, I thought, with one another. And that's typically, in my experience, what it's taken me to get comfortable with me transitioning into something new. Like when I first started doing radio full-time for the Rockets, I felt it probably took me about 2.5 months to get comfortable in my own skin. And then when I transitioned to doing TV as well, same thing. It probably took me 2.5 months before I felt actually comfortable with what I was doing there. And the same thing this time around. But it's a process. And when you're working with different people, you're just gonna have to learn what they like to do, what their preferences are. Ryan's a very, very energetic person. So am I. And so I've had to back off a little bit, I think, on that as well, because I think too overly energetic people is probably a little overbearing. And so you just kind of make some adjustments to one another. And ultimately over time, as I think we've developed, you develop chemistry.
I mean, right. So like, I prefer you and Ryan over you and Matt because when you and Matt were broadcasting together, the Rockets were like, well, I hate to use this term, but the Rockets were good, which are not really that great now, but they didn't have like as much as explosives. Like there's a lot of exciting things that the Rockets do now with like the dunks and all that stuff. And the Rockets really didn't do that back then. They were a big 3-point shooting team. So there wasn't a lot of exciting things to say to broadcast now. But now, like with the Rockets, you got KJ always throwing it down and Jalen and all those guys. So there's a lot of things to get excited about. So I just love how excited Ryan will get sometimes when KJ will just absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, I think that y'all are a perfect duo.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll say this, look, I love working with Bullard. I really did. Like I said, I've known him for a very long time. I really enjoyed working with him. I love working with Ryan too. And here's the thing about this business is that it is a very subjective business. Everyone has certain likes, like when you're trying to critique people who are broadcasting, right? It's very subjective. Some people like certain people's styles. Some people don't. You can't please everyone all the time. And you're going to have the people that are huge supporters of you, and then also people who can't stand you and think you're the worst thing ever. But it kind of comes with the public nature of the job. And so ultimately, I think what you have to do when you're doing this is just kind of continue to be true to yourself, do what you think is best and what works to your strengths, and go from there. And then, ultimately the people that most count when it comes to that subjectivity are the ones that are hiring you and paying you. If ultimately those people are happy with what you're doing, and there's not too much hate out there from others, then for the most part that you're doing things right. I think it's pretty funny when you see some guys who are doing some national stuff, and occasionally they'll sort of retweet out things where a fan of one team thinks that they're overly biased in the other direction, and then they'll tweet the same thing out from the other team with things and so again, it's very subjective. People tend to have opinions about what you do, but again, I think if you just stay true to yourself and and play to your strengths, that's really all you can do. And again, you can't please everybody.
Right. So my next question. So we've been talking about broadcasting. Let's get into a little bit of the Rockets. So my first question for the Rockets is, what's your goal for the Rockets by the end of the season? Do you want to see them like tank, or like is not a lot of Rockets fans will believe this, but I still think this team has a chance for the play-in tournament, even though the record doesn't show it. But they've had a very hard schedule in their first 17 games. So do you think the Rockets will tank for another top 5 pick this year? Or you think they can try to get into the playing game?
Well, I can tell you right now, they're not tanking. They're trying to win games. I certainly understand the desire to quote tank, especially when you have a generational talent sitting there at the top of the draft in Wembanyama coming up. But the Rockets are not attempting to tank. They're trying to win games, and frankly, that's what they should be doing. But most often in the NBA, in the professional sports in general, it's very difficult to win when you're young and inexperienced. And the Rockets are extremely young and extremely inexperienced outside of Eric Gordon. And so this season, to me, it's what it sort of was stated prior to last season and this offseason coming into it. It's about the growth and development of these young players. If they are better individually and they get better from day one to the end of the season, both individually and collectively, then to me, that's ultimately what success or the lack thereof should be determined with this team, and how everyone should ultimately be judged by that. And then whatever happens with their record, and whatever happens in the upcoming draft, whether they are fortunate to get the number 1 overall pick or not, it's still about the growth and development of these young players, because that is where this franchise is currently at. They're so young. It's basically just the second season of a rebuild, and these things take time and patience. And there is talent here. I will say that there is a lot of young talent, but it's in very few circumstances do teams with this many young players have any sort of success immediately. It does take time.
Right. I think they're in the right direction. I don't think they're going to make the playing game, but I see the talent in this roster.
It's there for sure.
So, and if they wouldn't be competing against teams like the Warriors if they were trying to lose. So I think they're playing good basketball. It's a young team, and they're still the youngest team in the NBA? I think so.
No, I don't, honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know if they're the youngest team in the NBA from top to bottom, because Eric Gordon and Boban kind of bring down their average age. But what I will say is that I know that their rotation, the vast majority of the players that they are playing as part of the rotation, if it's not the youngest playing core in the league, it's on the extreme short list.
Right. So I'm gonna switch it up a little bit in sports here. I'm gonna have a question. This is a question that came out of, I don't know where it came out of for me, but so the Astros and the Rockets share the same network in AT&T Sports.
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably going to be a no from you, but could you ever see yourself calling a game for the Astros on AT&T Sports?
I doubt it. I mean, Todd and Jeff and Julia do a great job
Yeah, they do.
with the Astros. Like I told you, baseball was my favorite sport growing up. It's what I played basketball. I actually stopped playing basketball while I was a freshman in high school. I played as a freshman and that was it. I stuck to baseball. It was the sport that ultimately most suited me. But I've pretty much been a basketball guy and associated with the Rockets, as we've mentioned, for a very, very long time. And Todd and Jeff and Julia do a great job.
Yeah, they do. I mean,
with the Astros, and obviously Kevin Eschenfelder chips in as well over there and does a terrific job. So no, I mean, I love what I'm doing right now. I love representing the Rockets, and I'm very much content doing what I am doing currently.
yeah, the only reason I wanted to ask that because I knew you did have like you've been a big baseball guy, and I've heard you bring up the Astros a couple times on the air. So I just wanted
They play a lot of games too, like a lot of games.
And so yeah, that I knew the answer is going to be no. Might as well not ask.
But they do a great job, and obviously the Astros are the cream of the crop in Major League Baseball. And my hope is that the Rockets. There you go. Ultimately, the Rockets can get back or to the level, that kind of level where they're competing for championships again.
Yeah. Okay. So my final two questions is, and I'm not concerned about them at all, but I just wanted to get someone else's output. Are you a little concerned about Jabari Smith? Because I mean, yeah, he had a great game against Golden State the other night, but besides that, there's been a lot of things that are a little concerning. I don't think so, but I just wanted to hear someone.
No, I'm not concerned at all. All you have to do is go back the last couple of seasons in the league and look at some of the top picks and how ultimately their rookie seasons went. Go back to Jalen Green. Jalen certainly had his moments at the start of last season, but it took him a little while to sort of be comfortable in his own skin and realize that he is who he is and he has the talent level, and that's the reason why he was selected number 2 overall. In the second half of the season, he was just tremendous. And then you even go back to the season before that and look at Anthony Edwards with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He was the number 1 overall pick and certainly had some moments, but wasn't as consistent as most people would have liked for a number 1 overall pick until the second half of the season. And then he was incredible. And so, no, I'm not worried about him at all. I never thought ultimately he was going to be a major player offensively for this team when you had Eric Gordon still here and Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. I thought ultimately, he wasn't going to be a big scoring guy. Look, he's had a bunch of open shots that you would like for him to hit with more consistency, but I think ultimately that will come again. See Jalen Green last year. But I think as we've seen from him the last couple of weeks, I think he's becoming more assertive. I think his defense is certainly improving. He's only 19 years old. He's so young. But no, I'm excited about him. I think he's going to be a big, big piece for this team for many, many years to come. And there's no reason to get overly concerned about 19-year-old kids in their first couple of months in the league. It's a big, hard transition to play at this level, and I think he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I'm really excited for him too. I mean, two of the things I only think about him is I think he needs to grow weight. I think he needs to add a little bit more weight, not a lot, because I mean he is really skinny for a power forward, and I think he needs. You're right. He's not an offensive player, but I think he is a decent shooter. So I would like to see him shoot the ball more. But I think he's going to be really good. And you made a good point there, Jalen Green. It took him a minute in his rookie year to get comfortable and start playing really good. And at the end of the season last year, he really started playing good. So hopefully the same thing happens with Jabari. But my next question is, and this is something I am not on board with, but this is like whenever I'll make a Rockets video on my channel, I'll get this comment all the time, and it makes me angry all the time. But what most Rockets fans that are commenting on my videos right now are saying that Steven Silas needs to be fired. What are your thoughts? I don't think so at all. But
that first of all, that's not my area. That's not my call whether or not anyone should be removed or relieved of their duties or traded or not. That's not my area. Steven Silas knows basketball. He knows what he's doing. I like him a lot. I have a lot of respect for him. And, you know, he's in a situation where obviously when he was first hired, the team was extremely different at the time of his hiring. I mean, Russell Westbrook was still here and James Harden was still here, and they had ended up acquiring and assigning a trade Christian Wood. And so they were going to go run it back again and try to make another deep playoff run. And then things kind of unraveled with James's trade request. And then ultimately he ends up in a rebuild situation. His first season was a transitional year as they were trying to work through that. And then ultimately are just now sort of beginning those steps. As I mentioned, this is the second year of that rebuild, the true second year of the rebuild as they're working on drafting and developing young talent. And so ultimately, again, as I said earlier, where this team and individuals, in my opinion, should be judged is the team and are the individuals, are they better on the last day of the season than they were on the first day of the season? And to me, I consider that success. Last year, the team was better at the end of the year than they were at the start. And the schedule has been absolutely brutal, historically brutal for the Rockets to start this season. Are they going to be better at the end of the year than they are at the start of the year? And then ultimately, I think that's where judgment should lay for both individuals and the team, generally speaking. It's still about growth and development. And this is a team that, as of right now, would you like more wins because wins make everybody happier? Sure. But ultimately, it's still about the growth and development of young players. And then the pressure of continuing to win games, the real pressure of winning games. This team is not quite there yet, but it will be coming here very soon. But for the time being, it's still about the growth and development of the players.
Yeah. I think that it's not time to panic, and we'll see how they're doing.
You got to be very patient. It takes time.
But we gotta wrap it up because I gotta upgrade my plan on only listening to 40 minutes. But thank you so much. Have a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.